Welcome to the RD2BE podcast. Each week we sit down with a different registered dietitian nutritionist to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the dietetics profession. Our aim is to dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. I'm Carl Barnes, the registered dietitian behind the scenes of RD2BE.
And I am Jenna Warnock, the RD2BE host. Our RD guests share their stories, career paths, and advice to help students like us succeed in the profession. Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. We are super excited to feature yet another dietetic internship, and this is another Veterans Affairs dietetic internship. And so we're super excited to feature Miss Jacqueline Roos. She's the DI director at the Catherine Austin VA dietetic internship, specifically located in Memphis, Tennessee. So thank you so much for joining us to talk about your program.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenna. I'm excited to have an opportunity to showcase our dietetic internship here.
Yeah, of course. And so to kind of set the stage with how you got to your role, can you describe us how you obtained your current role as DI director?
Sure. So I did a VA internship myself, and I really wanted to stay with the VA as a new dietitian. And my first job out of my internship was at the Memphis VA as an inpatient dietitian. However, outpatient was kind of always my passion. So when an opportunity open to kind of move into an outpatient role, I took it. And while I was an outpatient dietitian, I obtained my certified diabetes care and education support credential, and also helped develop our healthy teaching kitchen program. And then our medical center decided to pursue operating its own dietetic internship about 12 years ago. And I just really was interested. I volunteered to kind of help with writing the application. And I had served as a preceptor for some of the university-sponsored interns that rotated through. And when the position opened up, I just knew it was what I wanted to do. So I applied for it. And I've been in this role now for about 11 and a half years.
Wow, that is awesome. And it's great to hear how you started out as a VA dietetic intern, and then you've literally just gone full circle with coming back to be in the program director role, and also the involvement that you've had with this dietetic internship from the beginning and just your involvement with the entire process. And I think that's awesome. And going more into, again, the technical aspects of your program specifically, do you know about how many students apply each cycle versus how many you guys accept?
Sure. So for the past few years, we've averaged somewhere between 15 and 30 applicants for our 8 slots. And our program's set up so that we do have the dual track. So we have both a master's dietetic internship combined track, and then we also have a dietetic internship only track. And we can kind of adjust the number that we accept into each track based on the applications that we have. So we're a little bit flexible that way, but it's never more than 8 total.
Awesome, great. And I'm kind of glad that you mentioned how you offer those 2 different track options. And so for the MSDI track, can you describe how the master's degree component is incorporated into your internship?
Sure. So we have a partnership with University of Alabama, and it is an entirely online master's degree. And interns who are interested in this track, who need their master's, will apply to the University of Alabama before February 15th and get accepted. And they will actually start their master's coursework over the summer after they complete their DPD or after they're accepted. And then they will move to Memphis in September to start their rotations. And they'll do 40 weeks of supervised practice with us in clinical and food service and community and all of those practice areas. In the fall, they'll take 2 classes online. In the spring, they'll take 2 classes online. They'll continue their master's work in the summer, finish up the internship in June, and then continue with the master's that fall. And by December, they should be done and be eligible to get their verification statement to sit for the RD exam.
Awesome. And so with that graduate degree component and with it being completely online, is the out-of-state tuition waived for students?
They do not charge out-of-state tuition. So whether you're in-state or out-of-state, it's $440 per credit hour for a 30 credit hour degree.
Awesome, great. And so with the timeline of applying to that MSDI portion, you did mention like before the February 15th deadline, but do you have a recommended timeline for when students should apply to grad school if they're interested in your program?
If they apply in advance of that February 15th deadline, sometime in January, they'll get the answer before their application is due. But University of Alabama has told us that provided their application is submitted by February 15th, they can process their acceptance before match is completed. And the prospective intern can send me that letter, and we would honor that and consider their application, even if their acceptance comes after February 15th.
Awesome. Okay. And so then just to clarify, does that mean they can figure out if they're accepted into your program prior to match day in April?
No. So
Okay.
they can figure out if they're accepted to the graduate school program, but we do participate in the spring match. So they do have to wait until the match is completed to figure out if they're in the Memphis internship.
I gotcha.
So
Okay, and then so with the timeline, they find out that they get accepted into graduate school first and then the DI after.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and then so for the DI track only option, since you guys offer those two tracks, is there a certain type of master's degree you would recommend students to have either before or like during your internship to further reinforce like what your emphasis is on your program?
Okay, so we do not require the master's degree to be in any specific subject area. They do have to have completed it prior to entering the DI in September. So part of their application is either their graduate transcripts or a letter from their graduate advisor indicating that they're on track to complete that master's degree. But I found that interns have a lot of strengths in a lot of different areas, and really should be open to pursue their passion. So whether it's an MBA or an MPH or an MS in nutrition or another degree, we would welcome it and accept it, even if it's not directly nutrition related. We do require that if their DPD verification statements are over 5 years old, that they have taken some refresher courses. So the recency of education does come into play a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense. But I'm glad that you guys prioritize, the students pursuing their passion over, okay, what will I, learn in this short DI period? While it is an important period, like you should still focus on your preferences and your passions before, just what fits in that short period of time for sure. And so going back into the, more curriculum specifics of your program, kind of transferring from the graduate degree discussion over to your actual concentration, you guys are in ambulatory care, which is rather, from what I've heard from certain programs, that can be a rather unique concentration. And so can you explain what this concentration is and how it is implemented into your program?
Sure. So ambulatory care focuses on providing medical nutrition therapy and utilizing the nutrition care process in the outpatient setting. So it's different. A lot of times in prospective, students may confuse it with community, but it's much more clinically focused. Our interns will utilize and learn counseling skills like motivational interviewing, behavior change therapy, and stages of change therapy, and apply that to working with our veterans. They will work with our PACT model, which is the patient aligned care team. So every veteran's assigned a provider, a nurse, and a case manager. And for each PAC team and certain number of patients, the VA specifies that there has to be a dietitian, a pharmacist, a social work, and a psychologist, so that our veterans are ensured access to a dietitian. One of the neat things about the VA is that because we don't accept insurance, we don't require insurance, the dietitian can see the patient as many times as they'd like. So they really get to establish the relationship. The intern will also kind of get, as well with this ambulatory care concentration, get exposed to our whole health model, which is something that's rather new in the VA. Whole health is a model that transforms the healthcare conversation from what is the matter with you to what matters to you. And so this includes components of complementary and alternative medicine, including integrative and functional nutrition, mindfulness, and things like that. So they'll get a little bit of exposure to that. Some of our rotations that kind of fall in that ambulatory care concentration are, of course, our outpatient rotations, home-based primary care. We have a women's health center, so the women's health rotation would be there. Intensive diabetes. We have a community rotation with the Church Health Center, which is a nonprofit that provides healthcare to the uninsured population in Memphis. Whole health rotation. They get to work with our Healthy Teaching Kitchen, and then renal dialysis. And in general, our program is very clinically focused with the strong emphasis in MNT, but our concentration is more in the outpatient setting.
Yeah, and I think that concentration really just gives that holistic approach to nutrition and in tailoring it to the veteran population. And definitely, like, the themes of interprofessional team working and like just being able to work with a bunch of different people to benefit the veteran, the best that I can. And honestly, just from my personal experience, whenever I read the term ambulatory, my brain thought ambulance. And so my brain was just in like, oh, it's like, super fast paced or like, like kind of high stress, like units and stuff. But then as you were describing what the ambulatory concentration was, I'm like, no, it's like actual what ambulatory means and the holistic, like integrative nutrition approach, which I think is really great. And I'm glad that we're highlighting that, because I don't know if listeners or anything had that similar perspective towards what the concentration meant. So I'm really glad that you covered what the concentration actually entailed, which is a really great concentration as well. And so going back into like with what you mentioned, you guys are localized in Memphis, Tennessee, and like with most, almost, if I'm not mistaken, all VA dietetic internships, you guys have your on-site rotations. And so you guys do help cut costs with the graduate program component by having that completely online for that flexibility. But how do you see students save money with your internship, given that they have to move physically to Memphis? And I'm sure the stipend with the VA will be sprinkled in that discussion as well.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to promote the stipend, but so our program is eligible for the stipend, which is currently $15 per hour. So that's roughly about $24,000 over 40 weeks. And this is paid out biweekly like a paycheck and is subject to taxes and deductions. Other advantages of Memphis is our cost of living tends to be low. So apartments, groceries, all of that tends to be less expensive. I do try to put matched applicants in contact early so that if they're interested in rooming together or getting an apartment together, they can. And that helps split cost of living as well. As you mentioned, the University of Alabama's online tuition tends to be pretty affordable. And we chose it not just because it's affordable, but also because a lot of our staff members went through that graduate program and really enjoyed it and thought it was valuable. Incidentals like parking are included, so we don't have an additional parking cost. And then we do try to encourage our interns to apply for scholarships through the Memphis Academy, the Tennessee Academy, of course, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics as well.
And I think that's great how you do provide support from the interns up front with, like possible housing situations, and also like your mentioning of why you chose the University of Alabama, like, not just for that cost effectiveness, but also you have testimonies from previous or like, current employees at that hospital saying, hey, we did this program and it was super beneficial for our career. So you're putting the students first in a lot of different like aspects of the program, which I think is really great. And like, I'm glad that you highlighted the housing situation as well a lot, because I feel like a lot of students feel like they're a fish out of water whenever it comes to choosing or trying to figure out and scramble where to live. But we always like to highlight what DI directors recommend housing wise for incoming interns to think about, and just having them know typically the DI directors reach out to you first about, housing opportunities and ways to figure out housing. So yeah, you touched on a lot of great topics about that financial support aspect. And you did touch a little bit about, the location in Memphis and the cost of living and things like that. But do you have any specific favorite parts of the location of the Memphis VA Medical Center?
Sure. So we're located in what they call the medical center district. So there's several major hospitals right in the area, including the Children's Hospital, the county hospital, and a private hospital. But some of my favorite areas include neighborhoods that have lots of restaurants and shops. And that would be like Overton Square, Cooper Young, and Crosstown, which is actually a converted Sears warehouse that they've turned into apartments and restaurants and a brewery. And actually Church Health is in there too. So our interns rotate into that building because Church Health is there. In Memphis is kind of a small town, is a large city, well, relatively large depending upon where you're from, but it has a small town feel. So there's a sense of community. It's hard not to meet somebody who you don't know somebody in common with. We have mild winters, which is really, really nice, but we still experience the change of the seasons, which is also nice. Of course, Memphis is known for its barbecue. And we have a Memphis in May Fest every May with the Music Fest and Barbecue Fest. And then over on Beale Street, you have the jazz and the blues. And of course, we all know we're well known for Elvis and Graceland. So
Yeah, and I think honestly, kind of highlighting all the fun cultural and just kind of geographical benefits of being in Memphis is a really nice thing to touch on because, while you're in Memphis, you're not, yes, you are working 40 hours a week, and you are working the majority of the time, but you have weekends and you do have like time to explore the city and kind of see what it has to offer. And especially because you've been here for so long, you definitely know all the nooks and crannies and like fun things that interns can get around to in the city. And kind of getting more into, the V part of the VA with the Veterans Affairs and being in a VA dietetic internship. There is definitely like the, I guess, perspective you could say of, oh, like all interns are just going to see veterans and, there's a common demographic affiliated with veterans, like, middle-aged men and those types of things. So how do you ensure interns get a diverse learning experience with patients given the rather homogenous demographic of veterans?
sure. So we ensure our interns are ready to enter a variety of practice areas. One thing that's unique about our medical center is we do have a dedicated women's health clinic, and interns spend a week there with the dietitian who's assigned there, and they work with women of a variety of ages and health conditions. That's also where any of our veterans who are transgender and in the process of transitioning would be seen. And that is a rather small population, the transgender population, but we do support their care. They get experience in the community nutrition over at Church Health, like I mentioned. And this is a faith-based nonprofit that provides primary and specialty care to those with economic challenges. And the Church Health sees patients of a variety of ages, including some children. They spend a week at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital doing lectures, simulations, some shadowing to kind of learn all about pediatric specialty care, as well as about a day and a half with the University of Tennessee Center for Developmental Disabilities, learning about those metabolic disorders that can occur, and along with autism and some other developmental disabilities. Our population is about 85 to 90% male at the Memphis VA. However, our patient population tends to be very medically complex. So there's lots of opportunity to kind of stretch those MNT skills. And in fact, our graduates go into a variety of careers, including things like pediatrics, private practice, community, WIC, right out of graduation, because what we really stress when we're working with our interns is teaching them how to critically think, how to take guidelines and apply them to care and make decisions, which is really the foundation of any internship, because no internship can expose you to everything.
Like the common thing with the veteran population and with that stigma is like, oh, you just see the same types of patients every day, but you kind of forget the background and the different experiences that veterans had and how that makes different potential diseases arise, and having to use, with what you said, critical thinking skills. And you can see how those skills transfer to what those interns did in, after they graduated from the program. So I just wanted to comment on how awesome that was. But yeah, feel free, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the really big advantages of working at the VA and being a dietitian at the VA, and of course training at the VA, is there is a big push to practice at the top of your scope of practice. And there is a lot of support as new practice areas emerge to implement them. So whether it is the nutrition focused physical exam, which our dietitians do as part of the routine assessment, the nutrition care process, we have dietitians who've incorporated and gotten their intuitive eating credentials. So we do have some intuitive eating classes. Our dietitians have order writing privileges, which includes EN, so they can write two feeding prescriptions and diet orders, which allows them to kind of be a really integral part of the team. And they really teach the interns to reach out to the interdisciplinary team and be very comfortable reaching out to doctors, nurses, and giving their recommendations.
Yeah, and having that communication, like the confidence and also the communication piece, is really crucial as a dietitian, especially in the clinical space, because I mean, just from what I've heard with my professors and stuff, having that representation and that footing as a dietitian in the clinical workspace, you really have to like hold your ground to be able to like show initiative, make sure you're part of the patient's plan and everything like that. And so I'm really glad that you emphasize that, and also your program emphasizes on developing future dietitians that have that conviction and that confidence to kind of step in where they know they can step in, which I think is great. And so you mentioned a lot of really positive things that interns get out of this program, but do you have commonalities, or you've heard anecdotes of what past interns' favorite part of the program was?
Sure. I think the number one thing I hear is our preceptors is one of our big strengths. We have a team of 22 dietitians who really enjoy working with interns and being preceptors, and they really pour their knowledge and skills into our interns. Also, some of their favorite rotations that I hear a lot, home-based primary care tends to be a favorite. That's kind of unique to the VA, where you go out into the veteran's home and conduct nutrition assessments where the veteran is. Gives you a good perspective on things like food insecurity and how food access and how the living situation impacts your care plan. Geriatrics and palliative care rotation, that's very much a team-based rotation. Outpatient rotations all tend to be big favorites. I think there is the opportunity to really give back to the veteran population, and there is a sense of service when you train at the VA and work at the VA. And I think that is a strength. And as a result of that, about 35% of our graduates choose to work at a VA medical center, whether it's ours or a different one throughout the country after graduation. And then lastly, they really enjoy working with the interdisciplinary team. We do have a very big interdisciplinary focus.
Yeah, and that is a very long list of awesome, just the great benefits of being part of the VA system. And I can say, like, without fail, I've been able to interview, past VA programs as well. And there is a commonality of, once you're in the VA, you don't want to leave. And like, I've seen that with both the DI directors, because, a lot of them, including you, started as a VA intern, and you literally just worked your way up to the director. And then that percentage of 35% wanting to stay in the VA after graduating, like that definitely, even just the statistics speak for themselves to seeing how much value and how much the interns enjoy programs like within the VA, which I think is great. And so say that someone is listening to this podcast and they're like, oh my gosh, I love the VA. I want to apply to like their programs as soon as I can, once I can apply for dietetic internships. And so what advice would you give those students getting ready to apply for dietetic internships? And you could specify it to VA dietetic internships or just dietetic internships in general.
Okay. Just in general, when you're considering applying to internships, one thing I really like to stress to our current crop of graduates that over the past couple of years is that the selection process is not nearly as competitive as it was a few years ago. So don't be afraid to apply to a program that interests you if you meet their application criteria or their minimum criteria. Especially with VA, there's a myth that we're too competitive because we offer the stipend. But a VA dietetic internship is not any more competitive than other programs. So don't be afraid to apply. In terms of just getting your application ready, the DICUS application can be a little daunting. So start early. I would choose your references carefully and really take time with your personal statement. Those two are what we use to get to know you on paper. A lot of programs may do interviews. We do Zoom interviews. But how you really present yourself initially is through that application, and particularly that personal statement. Don't be afraid to go to your writing center and really customize it to each application. And then lastly, just be open to all rotations. A lot of times prospective interns leave their undergrad or graduate coursework convinced that they want a specific practice area, but you may be surprised at how different application is from textbook. And you may find areas that you initially weren't interested in that you find you really enjoy.
Wow, yeah, and that was just an awesome hit list of just like all the things that you should target on your dietetic internship application. So yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Jackie Roos, for showcasing your awesome VA dietetic internship program in Memphis, Tennessee. And if the listeners are interested in your program, we'll provide the link to your website so that they can check it out. But yeah, just thank you so much for taking the time to showcase your program. And I know listeners are going to get a lot from it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on today.